None are more hopelessly enslaved as those who falsely believe that they are free. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It is hard to free fools from the chains they revere. Voltaire.
And never forgetting also that there is this other unseen hand that knows absolutely what consciousness is, who are experts in that fact. You're walking around couldn't care less. You're waiting for the next movie to come out and the next fashion and all that, what Hollywood's going to do next. But there's people there who have a thorough understanding of human consciousness, human psyche, human libido, and they're working on it 24/7 to feather their own nests and also to keep man in servitude, man whom they think is their creation. You know, they think of man as just being one of their own, you know, like somebody treats a pet. If you actually watch how people mostly treat their pets, you know, when you really watch it, you'll find that the pet is a slave. Well, we have people ruling this society who think of human beings as pets and slaves. Yeah, they provide you with some food and they take you for a walk now and again, you know, but they basically you are a pet and you'll be told where to sit and where to go and what to do. That should be obvious to people by now. But these individuals don't really have any fear of us. Well, they do have fear of us to the extent that they know if we were awakened what we could do.
I'm deeply troubled that a very vague, emotionally stated, semi-theologically defined diagnosis of the central global menace is obscuring our national ability to comprehend the historically unprecedented challenge which is being posed in our time by a massive global political awakening, and thus is obstructing our ability to deal effectively with the global political turmoil that this awakening is generating.
So their motive of why they would want to dumb down people is also highly practical. Remember, these people are very, very practical. They may be evil, but they're also very practical. They know that you don't want a mass of intelligent, free-thinking, self-aware, proactive, deeply concerned, spiritually empowered people. That's the worst threat that they can imagine. So it's very practical for them to keep people, you know, what do they call it? One leash for one neck. Everybody in a complete sense of consent, with the illusion that they're independent. It doesn't work without that.
Take the red one. I distinctly remember saying to myself, "Thank God I am not a slave," when I saw The Matrix the first time. It was also the first time I ever felt like I lied to myself. Deep down, I knew I wasn't free. The Matrix on the surface is about machines enslaving man. In order for the machine to harvest the productive energy of the humans, the machines had to keep the humans in a dreamlike state. So they created the Matrix. In reality, we live in a matrix, a system of control to keep us happily producing for our slave owners, the elite. Before the main character, Neo, could even begin to fight the system or even hear the truth, he had to make a decision. None but ourselves can free our minds. Bob Marley. You can take the blue pill. You can believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. The blue pill allowed you to believe whatever you want to believe. This is the illusion that we all live in. It could come in the form of cognitive dissonance, where you would struggle with two opposing thoughts, that you're free, but you're really not. Doublethink. Narcissism. Becoming a psychopath. Or that everything is just a coincidence. The red pill offered only the truth. I hope, for you, the Sons of Liberty Academy is your red pill. The elite set up a system that benefits them and enslaves you. Pure genius. The world wants to be deceived. Let it be deceived, a Latin saying. The true genius of their system is you become so dependent on the system that you defend their system. Most of these people are not ready to be Many of them are so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. The powers that be. This could be everybody from the elite down to your local cop. Sheeple. People who blindly follow the system. They may feel that they are educated when in fact they're probably just thoroughly indoctrinated into the system. Neo represents the one, the individual fighting against the collective system. Paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money, and not money itself. Thomas Jefferson. What is the Matrix? What is the Matrix? It is control. The pitch. We are the land of the free and home of the brave. The reality. We are all just slaves to the system. Debt is slavery of the free. The robots are coming. The robots are coming. The idea that what we create to serve us ends up ruling us. Stefan Molyneux. Stefan took an interesting take on the Terminator and the Matrix. Brought an interesting thing. That we have this primordial fear of what we end up creating ends up ruling us. And in both movies, there's a deep down issue that we create machines, but the machines end up ruling us. We created a government by and for the people. Now we have the IRS on our back, pharmaceutical companies drugging us, the world's largest prison population, military spending that outspends the entire world, Wall Street that gets bailed out on top of taxpayers. Shock and awe, oil companies, torture, military bases all over the world, a crashing dollar, and a completely out of control deficit, coups. The government that we once created by and for the people to act as a guardian of our freedoms now enslaves us. So what we have created is enslaving us. Can you say moo? Stefan goes further out on a limb and makes this awesome insight on slavery and statism. We own cows because they produce goods and services that are in excess of the upkeep of the animal. Early empires conquered other nations to gain slave labor to fuel their empires. The slaves produced excess goods and services beyond what it took to provide for themselves. The process of hunting, capturing, breaking in, and owning animals was the same process as owning slaves. The empires that grew the most through slavery were guided by an elite who profited off the system that they created. The elite, quote-unquote, farmers needed a system to capture and maintain their slaves. They had originally an enforcer class that was higher up on the food chain. They were the slave drivers in the military that was the muscle behind the organization. When the agricultural technology improved to the point where it produced the capital to found the Industrial Revolution, the elite farmers needed their livestock to go from the country to the cities. These serfs were much more valuable to the elite, mass-producing capital goods instead of just food. In an effort for the elite farmer to come up with a better urban inventory management, many chose very restrictive means of forcing their slaves to work. Others came up with more of a free-range approach that allowed their slaves the illusion of freedom, but never the ability to get off the elite farmer's farm. This freedom is given to slaves not to make them free, but to make them vastly more efficient. China is a perfect example of how much more productive serfs can be if you give them more room to move. The Chinese elite changed inventory control from a communist, restrictive one to a state capitalistic one, with no political freedom. So if you look at the political and economic movements of the 20th century as an elite inventory control, the true history was a battle of the most efficient inventory management system. The inventory is us. At the end of the 20th century, state capitalism, represented by the American class, proved to be the most competitive system, as the American system conquered the communists, Nazis, and the monarchies. The American system outproduced all other inventory management systems. The elite allow additional freedoms to their slaves only to perpetuate the illusion of freedom and to increase the productivity for the elite. The elite saw that there was no longer politically profitable to keep slaves without the political freedom. And the same thing goes with women. Think of the feminist movement. It was funded by the elite to give women more freedom. Gloria Steinem was a paid CIA operative who was the main leader of the feminist movement in the 70s. Because of this movement, now the elite have more workers, less supervision on the children, more abortions, more divorce, and a disintegration of one of the greatest weapons against the elite. Women raised and nurtured the families and created happy, healthy, independent children. We already know that those people are not susceptible to the elite's game. They were also the glue in the communities that was a support system for many of its members. To further this illusion of freedom, the elite farmer gave the livestock the choice to choose how the farm is run. We know this as elections. We are given the choice, but never the choice to shut down the farm or change the system.
When someone, a foreigner say, loans money to the American government, what are they getting in return? Well, they are getting promises of interest payments and eventual repayment of the principal. Where does your government get this money? The government is not a business. It does not generate profits in the free market. So where does it get the money to repay its creditors? Are you beginning to understand that it is not dollars that are being sold, or bonds, or agency debt, or treasuries, or anything like that? Where is your government going to get the money to pay off its creditors? It's not pieces of paper, or contracts, or computer bits that are being sold. There is only one thing that the government has to sell. Governments have only one asset that they can use as collateral. Your leaders are selling you. When China lends $800 billion to your government, what they get in return is a guarantee that $10,000 plus interest will be taken from your family at gunpoint and shipped overseas. When a farmer gets a loan from a bank, he uses his livestock as collateral. It is the milk and meat his cows will produce in the future that he will use to pay off his loan. The bank is buying a share in his cows. You are the livestock that your leaders use as collateral. The leaders that you cheer for and throw parades for and drop balloons behind and donate money to are selling you to Chinese rulers, to the Japanese, to the Nigerians, to South American drug lords with accounts in the Caribbean banking centers, to Russia, to Korea, to Egypt, to Colombia, to Chile, to the Philippines, to Malaysia, and anyone else who is willing to give them a few dollars in return for the blood, sweat, and toil of your future. The flag that you praise and the anthems that you sing and the rulers that you weep and kneel before have as much loyalty to you as a plantation owner had to his slaves. And sadly, plantation slaves had more pride than we do. Plantation slaves did not generally praise their masters for selling them off, for auctioning off the lives, hopes, dreams, and futures of their own little children. We can understand that cattle may lick the hand of the farmer who lowers an axe to its neck, because cattle are dumb beasts that cannot comprehend their real relationship with the farmer and his imminent plans for them. What is our excuse? When we chant, USA, 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 when we cheer and bow and beg and scrape and sing and weep with joy that some new farmer now presides over the wholesale dismantling and sale of our family's futures, when we love with obsessive emptiness the leaders who laugh while they auction us off to every tin pot dictator and stockbroker the world over, what is our excuse? Has our pride been so broken that we lunge with pathetic joy at every new silver-tongued demagogue who pretends to care for us even a tiny little bit? In the future, our children will demand to know why we knelt and cheered as they were sold off on the auctioneer's block. This video, and my life's work, is my answer to my child. What's yours?
That was also Stefan Molyneux. I really recommend. I think his website is freedomradio.com or Freedom Domain, but just Google him. He's got a terrific amount of work, and I really respect him. They don't call it programming for nothing. As productivity grew, so does the parasitic government and the elite classes. Their dependence weighs on the productivity of the serfs. The elite found an awesome tool to have their cake and eat it too. The elite farmers saw the advantage of the propaganda class as a tool of getting the slave to accept their conditions instead of forcing them with the enforcer class. This can include intellectual, artists, and clergy. They're all highly paid, and they all deal in illusions and having you accept your reality. This class of marketeers are highly paid and will sell you anything but the truth. They are essential to keep us from getting depressed about the reality that we are living in. For depressed serfs are unproductive serfs. We are in the boredom-killing business.
Less than 3% of you people read books. Because less than 15% of you read newspapers. Because the only truth you know is what you get over this tube. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube is the gospel, the ultimate revelation. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. This tube is the most awesome goddamn force in the whole godless world. And woe is us if it ever falls into the hands of the wrong people. And that's why woe is us that Edward George Ruddy died. Because this company is now in the hands of CCA, the Communication Corporation of America. There's a new chairman of the board, a man called Frank Hackett, sitting in Mr. Ruddy's office on the 20th floor. And when the 12th largest company in the world controls the most awesome goddamn propaganda force in the whole godless world, who knows what shit will be peddled for truth on this network? So you listen to me. Listen to me. Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So if you want the truth, go to God. Go to your gurus. Go to yourselves. Because that's the only place you're ever going to find any real truth. But man, you're never going to get any truth from us. We'll tell you anything you want to hear. We lie like hell. We'll tell you that Kojak always gets the killer and that nobody ever gets cancer in Archie Bunker's house. And no matter how much trouble the hero is in, don't worry, just look at your watch. At the end of the hour, he's going to win. We'll tell you any shit you want to hear. We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
We will tell you any shit you want to hear. We deal in illusions. TV programming is just that. It's to program our minds. This class peddles distractions and illusions in order for us to accept the way things are, or find, and more importantly, buy a little happiness in an increasingly bleak world. This unhappiness we seek pleasures, the propaganda class tells you whatever you want to believe, while the elite do whatever they want. You buy their lies because they make you feel better. The truth is a hard, cold reality. You don't want to believe that you're a slave, or the products that you buy are made by slaves worse off than you, or that wars are fighting for corporate interests, etc. Anything but the truth. This Marine is pretty much the epitome of that 1,000-yard stare, and it's actually the same stare that children get, and quite frankly all people get, staring at the TV. This is a stare of hopelessness. And it's ironic, because when I went through boot camp, they trained us to have that 1,000-yard stare, to stare through people. And I think that's an important brainwashing technique that the Marines use, so that you see through people and that you become emotionally shut off from other people. And it's the same emotion that you get from watching too much TV or going off to war. You lose a bit of your soul. And you can see it in that 1,000-yard stare. The mother of all distractions, of course, is war. Think of peaceful times as a pre-season. The elite of each nation implements their game plan, their national strategy. They draft with elections, treaties, and allegiances. They have contract signings that you'll see with resources. They have their cheerleaders warm up the fans, which is our daily news. They build up their team, the military. The regular season consists of economic and proxy wars. World War is the Super Bowl because the elite play their best plans and their best players for the whole enchilada. They drive up debt, serfs work for free for the team, thinking it's patriotism to work as a slave. They waste their productive capacity to capture more slaves and more resources. Eventually, all these inventory control systems fail because they're unnatural creations and they are immoral. We simply need not to be in the way when they collapse. Shock absorbers. What's the difference between a communist and a socialist? A communist is a socialist with an AK-47 in a hurry. How do we become slaves? In the past, it was either war or societal structure that you were born into. There are two modern ways to enslave a free society that I have identified. The first is shock. The U.S. government funded research on how to get prisoners to talk. They experimented with torture techniques that include sleep deprivation, waterboarding, stress position, isolation, exposure, all sorts of hallucinogenic drugs, electroshock therapy. The shock torture reduced the prisoner to a near childlike state. They were more willing to accept the authorities' demands. These are just some of the photos from Abu Ghraib. These are probably not photos that you've seen a lot of, and we certainly are going to go into more depth on this. But you can see all the different torture techniques that we use on our enemies. And if we allow our government to get away with it here, I have no doubt that they will eventually use it on us. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. Milton Friedman. What works for individual society? What works for individuals works for societies. All the techniques used to mentally abuse an individual can become institutionalized. Someone constantly putting you down, that could be your schools or your media. Someone beating you up, that could be your police or military. Someone stealing from you, the government, Wall Street. Economic shock. Shock can come in more than one form. One is economic shock. The Great Depression took a roaring 20s of America with all sorts of incredible technological jumps and good times. And as the stock market crashed, it threw the country into a state of economic shock. This is similar to what happened to the collapse of the Soviet Union. 160 million citizens suffered as 17 billionaires were born. And bursting of the stock market and housing bubbles. All are forms of economic shock, and all are planned. Military shock is the other one. 9/11, Iraq with their shock and awe, or coups such as the one in Iran. What about the shock that we felt here after 9/11? In our shock, we accepted 2 wars, a Patriot Act, which is anything but patriotic, electronic surveillance of our citizens, privatizing of our military, a Department of Homeland Security, which sounds more Nazi than anything I've ever heard, a completely farce of a 9/11 commission. I think we spend more money investigating Bill Clinton's blowjob than the biggest crime ever to our society. Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib, torture, institutionalized torture, shows like 24 that numbed our mind to torturing innocent people. $2 trillion missing from the Defense Department, $1 trillion budget deficits, and the militarization of our local police. Not to mention airline screenings and no-fly lists. There are 2 main reasons why shock is applied to societies. The first one is profit. The elite position themselves before events, or more likely, to benefit their already established positions. But the main reason is quite simple. They want control. All psychopaths have delusions of grandeur, and the elite are no different. They want more power over quote-unquote inferior people. They want to destroy their competition, whether it's domestic or international. They don't have remorse. They don't have empathy. They're very cunning and manipulative. And the elite use crisis as a very powerful tool to drive masses into the corral faster than they otherwise would have. One drawback from shock as a power tool is that it's temporary in nature. The subject is never to have a sense of normalcy to regain their mental footing if shock is to be effective. That's why we were constantly hammered with Osama boogeyman terror alerts and the Homeland Security advisor coming out that today was an orange day or a yellow day, never a low or guarded day. It was always something bad was going to happen. Education and truth are enemies of mental shock. If you can foresee these tactics, or then you can actually mentally prepare for the shock, and at the very least it'll put you ahead of the crowd. Another enemy of shock is people getting together and talking. Issues are less ominous when people can share their educated experiences and they feel less alone and less helpless. Death by 1,000 cuts. Gradualism is the elite's machine that churns every day. You might not notice it, but it is there, gradually taking away our freedoms and our wealth.
Our conversation is with Mr. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was the, and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his Then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So the next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C.
Ideological subversion. It takes 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. I think we're well past that. This was recorded in 1985, and you know, I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination that we are not as mentally as strong as we were back in 1985. Then there's a 3 to 5 year destabilization period, and this is where we start seeing institutions fail, stress in society. I think we're experiencing the tail end of that now. And then all it takes is a crisis, that right moment to switch everything over. And you know, this could be coming up shortly or in another couple of years, but the point is that the crisis basically shows the weaknesses of all the stress from the destabilization, and then afterwards a new paradigm is formed, and it could be one of, you know, tyranny or freedom, depending on how demoralized the nation is. Decisions on technological adaptation, implementation, and use at local authority levels are often not one-shot events. Instead, they are characterized by a multiple sequence of decisions made across a tiered hierarchy. A process is called disjointed incrementalism. The decision-making sequence starts with the conceptual or strategic policy type decisions at the apex, or the elite, followed by semi-conceptual or semi-strategic plans and programs, culminating in the detailed or specific project-related decisions. That's from the United Nations Environmental Program. But it gives you an insight on how the elite look at a gradual process of changing societies. In fact, they even have a map of it here, where they mapped it out. And you can see that same process, where at the very top there's a tiered elite that basically set forth an agenda, a grand strategy, and it's up to local authorities, whether they're senators, presidents, heads of foundations, you know, the brain power to actually, you know, to put it into motion. And then as it goes down, it becomes more detailed and more defined until you have a complete process. Gradualism is all those laws and taxes and propaganda that are forced on us every day. It is worth it for all those special interest groups to work very diligently to get special laws passed. But for the mass of society, none of them are big enough to start campaigns of awareness to stop to stop them, but put together, they are an incredible attack on our freedoms. I am sure that you got this email before, but it's amazing how gradualism can change a society. This is an email I got a while ago. I'm sure it's been passed around. Oh, all the kids who were born in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. First, we survived being born to mothers who smoked and drank while they carried us. They took aspirin, ate blue cheese dressing, tuna from the can, and didn't get tested for diabetes. Then after that trauma, our baby cribs were covered in bright-colored lead-based paints. We had no child-proof lids on medicine bottles or doors or cabinets. When we rode our bikes, we had no helmets, not to mention the risks we took hitchhiking. As children, we would ride in cars with no seatbelts or airbags. We drank from the garden hose and not from a bottle. We shared one soft drink with 4 friends, and from one bottle, no one actually died from this. We ate cupcakes, white bread, real butter, drank soda pop with sugar in it. But we weren't overweight because we were always outside playing. We would leave home in the morning, play all day, as long as we were back by the time the streetlights came on. No one was able to reach us all day, and we were okay. We would spend hours building our go-karts from scraps and then ride down the hill only to find that we forgot to put on the brakes. After running into the bushes a few times, we learned to solve that problem. We fell out of trees, got cut, broke bones and teeth, and there were no lawsuits from these accidents. We ate worms and mud pies and made from dirt, and the worms did not live in us forever. We were given BB guns on our 10th birthday, made up games with sticks and tennis balls, and although we weren't told what would happen, we did not put out very many eyes. Little League had tryouts, and not everyone made the team. Those who hadn't learned to deal with disappointment. Imagine that. The idea of parents bailing us out if we broke the law was unheard of. They actually sided with the law. This generation has produced some of the best risk takers, problem solvers, and inventors ever. The past 50 years we have seen an explosion in innovation and new ideas. We had freedom, failure, success, and responsibility, and we learned how to deal with it all. Look at how our society has changed. We had bright, imaginative kids, smiley, athletic, in good shape, good health, not sick all the time. And look what we have become. That's gradualism working on our society. All those little things that happen in our lives to change us, to accept new norms, to accept lower standards. That's how gradualism works. What have we become? Here's this pretty girl. She's obviously in the military. 20 or 30 years ago, she probably wouldn't be in the military, but if she did, she certainly wouldn't be like this. These series of photos have disturbed me ever since I found them. This girl looks like she's bright, intelligent, and yet morbidly deranged. To be smiling so near all these injuries and deaths and giving a big thumbs up. I even found this picture of the family of the dead person that she's given the good thumbs up to. I wonder how her family would feel if somebody did that to her. USSA. Every step we take towards making the state our caretaker of our lives, by that much we move towards making the state our master. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Karl Marx created 10 steps in the Communist Manifesto necessary to destroy free markets and constitutional republics. To each according to his needs, from each according to his ability. This is the foundation of slavery. Marx hated the bourgeoisie, the middle class, and called them the gross merchants of exploitation. Let's see how gradualism of the elite has transformed and perverted our American free market constitutional republic. Number 1 of the Communist Manifesto, the abolition of private property and the application of all rents of land to public purposes. This is now in our society as property taxes, zoning laws, Bureau of Land Management, environmental regulations, building permits and inspections, eminent domain abuse. Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. We know this income tax came about in 1913, and it was originally intended only to be used to tax the top 0.5% of the population, and now we're all touched by it. On the federal level, the state, the county, and sometimes even city income tax. There's a Social Security tax that's thrown on top of it, various millionaire or luxury taxes. Basically, the harder we work, the more we pay. This acts as an elimination of threats to the elite. The elite do not pay these taxes because they use tax-free foundations to hold their wealth, to which they control. But the average citizen does not have access to those benefits. They write the laws to benefit themselves. Number 3, the abolition of all rights of inheritance. I paid taxes all my life and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And then the estate tax comes by and says, give me the t-shirt. Estate taxes Number 4 is confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. Government seizures, tax liens, IRS confiscation of property without due process. They can literally go into your bank account and take your money without even warning you. Asset forfeiture laws. Right now they're used on terrorists, but is it really a stretch of the imagination to think that one day they're going to use it on quote-unquote patriots? Number 5 of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, the centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. The Federal Reserve is a private-owned bank, but that, again, serves the elite's interests. They get to issue fiat currency, and they practice and maintain fractional reserve banking. These are the main tools of control, because if you can control the currency, you can control the nation. Number 6, centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. The Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Department of Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, mandated driver's license, various traffic and transportation laws. Number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. This is more or less known as the Department of the Interior, the Department of Commerce and Labor, the EPA, Bureau of Land Management, and the National Park Service, Department of Energy. Number 8, Equal liability of all labor. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. We have the minimum wage, affirmative action, government work projects, and turning a blind eye to illegal immigrants that corporations use to lower their costs and drive out legal workers and drive down wages for all other citizens. And then on top of it, the elites move the productive capacity to slave labor countries, where they don't face any of the laws and regulations that we have here to protect workers and the environment. Destroying the economy by enslaving a population with debt and driving down wages as the job situation becomes worse. That's what we're going through right now. Number 9, a combination of agricultural and manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by more equitable distribution of population over the country. Our food industry is a corporate giant. Food Inc. is a great documentary kind of bringing light to this subject that definitely deserves our interest. The lowering of quality of food hurts our health. And Americans have also lost the ability to feed themselves. You know, at the turn of the last century, something like 85% of the population lived, close to farmland, and were involved in that. And then as our society became more industrialized, we've moved more towards cities and more dependent on the centralized food system. And then to get back to the number 9 here, China has forced relocation programs. Basically, when they want to move populations, they send their armies in to, basically move entire populations to where the government wants it, without any care or ability to pay back these people for the land that they have lost. And number 10, and perhaps the most important one, because without this one, none of these others would work. Free education for all children in public schools, the abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, and the combination of education with industrial production. Basically, the public education system's there to indoctrinate the children into worshiping the state, more or less, and trained the children to work for the system and not against the system. They want people to not think outside the box and memorize certain things that the state deems necessary for their needs. But nowhere along the line is entrepreneurialism taught. So here's this video I'm sure you've seen of the young kids being indoctrinated with Obama. And I don't care if it's Obama or Bush, this is not the role of our schools.
He said we must take a stand to make sure everyone gets a chance. Bureaucracy and Obama. He said red, yellow, black, and white, all are equal in this sight. Bureaucracy and Obama. Yes, bureaucracy.
Okay, now everybody, let's sing it together on the count of 3.
All right.
No.
I like that.
1, 2, 3.
Bureaucracy and Obama. He said we all must lend a hand to make this country strong again. Bureaucracy and Obama. He said it must be fair today. Equal work means equal pay. Bureaucracy and Obama. He said we all must take a stand to make sure everyone gets a chance. Bureaucracy and Obama. He said red, yellow, black, or white, all are equal in this country. Bureaucracy and Obama. Yes! Bureaucracy and Obama.
Okay, now let's
I can't watch that anymore, but basically, I think Joseph Stalin said that if you can get me give me kids by the time they're 7, I can turn them into anything that I want them to. And that's the idea of the public school system. They want you to get them into child daycare, nursery schools, sometimes even at 4 months old, to get them away from the family, get them away from people who actually care about them, and get them into the hands of people who are do not necessarily have the best interests of kids in their mind. And trust me, I'm a friend with a lot of teachers, and this is a very touchy topic. But at the end of the day, teachers don't have a say what goes on in their classroom. They don't have a say in the curriculum that's taught. And quite honestly, the teachers' union, the fact that it's a union, it's a centralized, powerful organization, and that's not how schools used to be, and that's not what made this country great. Our school system used to be privately funded, and families used to get together and build schoolhouses and have whoever was best fit to teach the kids to teach it. The school system we have now, the way it's set up, it's just atrocious, and our grades show it. And I'm certainly going to go into this subject because I'm very passionate about it. But essentially, public education is public indoctrination. They train our kids to love their slavery. And they suppress children who rebel. There's always those kids that are, antsy, and I certainly was one of them. I would doodle on everything, and I like to talk and stuff. And thank God I wasn't brought up in an era where I could have been strung out on Ritalin. And to see all these kids strung out on psychotropic drugs at such a young age, when it's their natural, their abilities that are coming out, and to suppress that at such a young age, destroys the passion that's built into these kids. And it also encourages, the average student to take on debt to further their education, to ensure better jobs. We encourage them not to have the entrepreneurial spirit and work for the government. I can't tell you how many brilliant people I've seen go through college, and they go through teaching programs, and they have the ability to go out and start jobs and create jobs, but they end up getting looped into the system at an early age, and once you're in, you're in. It's tough. It's tough making a life change like that. And I think one of the most scariest things is with our education system, they purposely omit the most important lessons, like the stuff that I'm covering in the Sons of Liberty. There would be no need for this if we taught education, if we taught monetary policy. Don't you find it ironic that, at 4th and 5th grade we're teaching kids about drugs and sex education instead of probably the most important thing to guaranteeing somebody's success in life is understanding money and balancing a checkbook. We'll spend billions of dollars, making videos and spending time teaching kids not how to do drugs and sex, when all that does is actually get them interested in those subjects. There's no need to teach them at that young age. Basically, the whole point of the Communist Manifesto is the elimination of property rights, dissolution of the family union, and destruction of the opiate of the people, which is religion. And that's Karl Marx's quote. Those three things were the backbone of free society. People who had the ability to take care of their own property, keep the fruits of their labor. A strong family produced healthy, mentally stable people who did not need to rely on the government. And then the religion taught people that when they were in trouble to look towards a higher purpose, or not complain about their way that they were, and muscle through instead of looking for the government to help them out. Open your eyes and stop supporting a system that's working towards your slavery. Opt out. The lowest common denominator. This is an article I clipped out and I saw on the internet. Every day some do-gooder is trying to save us from ourselves. We have so many laws and safety commissions to ensure our safety that it seems nearly impossible to have an accident. The problem, though, is we need accidents, and a lot of them. Danger is nature's way of eliminating stupid people. Without safety, stupid people would die in accidents. Since dead people don't reproduce, our species would become progressively more intelligent, or at least less stupid. With safety, however, however well-intentioned it may be, we're evolving into half-wit mutants because of idiots who by all rights should be dead, are spared from their frightfully early graves, and are free to breed more imbeciles. Let's do away with safety and improve the species. Take up smoking, jaywalking at every opportunity, play with blasting caps, swim right after a big meal, take your choice of dangerous activity and do it with gusto. Future generations will thank you. While I'm sure this is a tongue-in-cheek article, and it certainly has eugenic hints to it, there is a lot to be said about shielding idiots from their folly. Here's a quote. "The ultimate result of shielding men from the effects of folly is to fill the world with fools." Herbert Spencer. And I think American society, because we've been shielded from all of the results of our actions, and we haven't fully felt them yet. 30 years of consumerism and debt buildup and the degeneration of our families. So all this stuff has been shielded from us, and we've been protected thus far. And because of that, we engage in those activities more and more. And the result is a degeneration of society. This is a scene from Idiocracy, which I highly recommend that you see it. Mike Judge created it. It was a little ahead of its time and certainly well worth watching. But we essentially get to a point where society degenerates so much that we have a WWF president, and during a State of the Union he says, "I know shit's bad now with all the starving bullshit and the dust storms, and we're running out of French fries and burrito coverings, but I got a solution." And Idiocracy, the first 2 minutes shows you how shielding all these people from their stupidity fills the world with idiots.
As the 21st century began, human evolution was at a turning point. Natural selection, the process by which the strongest, the smartest, the fastest reproduced in greater numbers than the rest, a process which had once favored the noblest traits of man, now began to favor different traits. Most science fiction of the day predicted a future that was more civilized and more intelligent. But as time went on, things seemed to be heading in the opposite direction, a dumbing down. How did this happen? Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, it began to simply reward those who reproduced the most and left the intelligent to become an endangered species.
Having kids is such an important decision.
We're just waiting for the right time. It's not something you want to rush into, obviously.
No way.
Oh, shit, I'm pregnant again!
I got too many damn kids. Thought you was on the pill or some shit.
Hell no!
Must have been thinking of
Brittany! No, you. There's no way we could have a child now. Not with the market the way it is, no.
No, that just wouldn't make any sense.
He don't care about you.
Yeah, well, there must be something he likes over here.
You ain't nothing to me, baby. Oh, shit. You want to be?
Well, we finally decided to have children, and I'm not pointing fingers, but it's not going well.
And this is helping.
I'm just saying that before I have in vitro, maybe you should be willing to...
It's always me, right?
No. It's not my sperm count.
Yeah! I'm gonna fuck all of y'all! That's my boy!
ChrisDuane is lucky to be alive. He attempted to jump a jet ski from a lake into a swimming pool and impaled his crotch on an iron gate. But thanks to recent advances in stem cell research and the fine work of Drs. Krinsky and Altschuler, ChrisDuane should regain full reproductive function.
Get your hands off my junk!
Unfortunately, Trevor passed away from a heart attack while masturbating to produce sperm for artificial insemination. But I have some eggs frozen, so just as soon as the right guy comes along...
And And so it went for generations, although few, if any, seemed to notice. But in the year 2005, in a military base just outside of Washington...
So I know that's only the first couple minutes of Idiocracy, but it goes to show how our society is not going the way towards the this solving all of our problems and living a utopian life, because the mass of society is being dumbed down towards the lowest common denominator, and yet this is all by design. The elite's plan of social degeneration is large in scope and in terms of duration and reach. The elite profit off of this. They don't want a smart, intellectually savvy mass of people, because if they saw that, then they would probably change the system to a system that benefits them and not the elite. But let's look how Japan has changed. Japan, before Western influence, had, obviously they had a monarchy and maybe not the best society for freedom, but they certainly had standards. They had beautiful garments and rich culture. The men were tough and, feared warriors. And even in World War II, they probably lost all their strongest dominant males in a battle to the end. And now let's look at Japan. They are known for these god-awful, wacky game shows. They're just not the society. It's just been dumbed down and degraded into this consumer society. This used to be a feared race and nation. The Chinese would never dare attack them, and now they've been degenerated into this. I don't even know what to call it. It's definitely an odd scenario. These are actually little bunks that they live in. This is that guy's home. It's an educated, rich society that's been destroyed with consumerism, distraction, and yet they still have a good diet, a healthy diet. Now let's look at our society. This is people from Walmart. And, it's hard to believe that this is even going on now, and then it's that bad, but I'm sure in certain areas of the country this is normal. But you certainly wouldn't see this 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Our society has just been degraded to just the lowest common denominator. And we were an educated society. Now I feel we're an uneducated, still a rich society because of our nation's backing. But we've been degraded with consumerism, distraction, and unlike the Japanese, we have a very poor diet. And that's why we're massively obese and high diabetes and heart attacks and cancer and all sorts of stuff. But eventually the elite want to lead us to this. This is China. And China is full of peasants, uneducated people with no private property, no hope, no chance, no poor diet. They're small, with poor nutrition. Their environment is completely polluted. The elite don't live here. They don't care what happens to the land. The rivers are just beyond atrocious. Fish die. They can't. People who used to fish there for generations. The waters are so polluted that they can't even do that. The smoke from the factories, the air quality. I can't imagine the asthma cases and lung cancer and carcinogens that these people are injecting. And yet this is a great society for the elite, because they profit off of the cheap labor, the lack of environmental regulations, so they're able to make massive amount of money. I always look at you see these people like Jay-Z and Beyonce, and they're incredibly wealthy, and they don't even make their money from music anymore. They make it from their clothing lines. And I find it ironic that some of these rich urban rappers have their own clothing lines, and they have turned into slave masters themselves through hiring poor workers and paying them pennies on the dollars, they have amassed millions upon millions of dollars of wealth. Richard Simmons is another one like that. So I find it interesting that that's an interesting dichotomy. And again, just China is just completely polluted, and quite frankly, this is probably going to be our future as we reindustrialize after we've been completely ripped apart. And of course, the Chinese government does not allow any political uprisings, so they're very oppressive police state. Tiananmen Square. So what the elite essentially want, and for us in Japan and the whole world, is a poor, uneducated society with poverty, pollution, and a police state, because that's a completely controlled mass of people. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Never be afraid to say what you feel. Let us protect all in life, liberty, and property, and then say to every American citizen, with the gifts God has given you, your brain and brawn and energy, work out your own fortunes under a just government and equal laws. Thomas Jefferson. Think of where we would be as a race if so much time, energy, and resources were not wasted on the elite system of propaganda, slavery, and war and deficits. They who would give up an essential liberty for temporary security deserve neither liberty or security. Benjamin Franklin. The authority of government can have no pure right over my person and my property, but what I concede to it. Henry David Thoreau. We tend to think of liberty as the ability to do whatever we want right now. But the assault on our liberty comes at us from three very different ways, and we must be vigilant against all of them. These three different ways occur in the past, future, and present. You, in the present, is represented by liberty or freedom to do as you wish. But if you are enslaved, it limits your choices that you can make in the present. You, in the future, is represented by your life. If you are killed, it extinguishes your ability to make choices in the future. You in the past is represented by the fruits of your labor. Your legitimately acquired property is the manifestation of your freedom of choice in the past. When your property is stolen, your freedom to do as you choose is severely limited. The elite use these three assaults on your past life, present liberty, and future pursuit of happiness. They attack your past life through theft, inflation, asset forfeiture, eminent domain, and inheritance taxes. They attack your present liberty through slavery, either income taxes, debt enslavement, a draft, or even prison. They also attack your future pursuit of happiness through murder, death penalty, war, abortion, poisoning of the environment, food, and drugs. In order to defend your present liberty, you must know and demand your rights. The elite will always back down on your constitutional rights because they know if they openly violate them, they risk waking the sheeple. They tend to only do this very gradually, and we've seen this with all the Patriot Acts and all the government interference into our liberties since 9/11. But they won't come right out and say, you can't speak in public anymore. They'll call you, they'll have no free speech zones or stuff like that. But they're gradually chipping away at all of our freedoms. That being said, there are many laws that they create to make us criminals. Remember that they got Capone on tax charges, not his criminal empire. So be wary about, doing anything that that could provoke them. Because if they really get a burr up their butt, they'll find something to put you away. In order to defend your future liberty, you need to educate yourself and be able to watch for trends to keep you and your family out of danger. And that's one of the main benefits of going through this program. I think through studying our past, we can divine the future. And so we as a small community can stay ahead of the curve and hopefully out of danger. In order to protect your past life's work, you need to save in gold and silver. Not dollars that can be inflated away. Not stocks and bonds that can be manipulated by Wall Street. Not even real estate. Property tax, zoning restrictions, a myriad of ways that they can devalue the property. Even eminent domain. I mean, they can outright seize your property and say it's, they have a shopping mall that they want to put in there, and you'll not get compensated. Whereas gold and silver, they're yours. You can hide them. They can't find them. They never degrade, and they hold their value. So I'm a big fan of that. It is important to understand that you alone own your life. You have no rights to anyone else's past life, present liberty, or future pursuit of happiness. Resistance. There can never be peace in Ireland until the foreign oppressive British presence is removed, leaving all Irish people as a unit to control their own affairs, determine their own destinies, as a sovereign people, free in mind and body, separate and distinct physically, culturally, and economically. This is Bobby Sands, and one of those things that I like to touch on is, do you know the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? So often one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And one clear definition that I think is lost, terrorists usually blindly attack civilian populations. And we will see that governments are one of the largest terrorists that purposely target civilians, whereas freedom fighters generally only target government buildings and assets. So it's just an important distinction that I want everybody to see. But no single person or persons, no matter what title they have the right to any of your lives in a truly free society. And nobody can give powers to other people that they themselves do not have. So if you don't have the right over somebody else's life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness, you can't give powers that you do not have to other people. And that means no group has the power to infringe on anyone's past life, present liberty, or future pursuit of happiness, no matter what title, rank, or anything that they hold. The greatest piece of paper ever. Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution, for if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy through the world. Daniel Webster. The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Patrick Henry. The Constitution is the defender of your past life, your present liberty, and your future pursuit of happiness. Article 1, Section 10.1, no state shall emit bills of credits, which are more commonly known as Federal Reserve notes, since money is debt, and only gold and silver shall be legal tender. An actual dollar is defined by 371.25 grains of fine silver, or 0.77 troy ounces of silver. That's what a dollar used to be. Now it's, anywhere from $15 to $20 an ounce. so it's been depreciated dramatically. And there is a death penalty for anyone debasing the nation's coinage. I only wish that that was still a law. The First Amendment: freedom of religion, speech, press, and assembly, the right to petition the government. This is the constitutional right to speak out against your government, and this is the very backbone of the freedom movement. The Second Amendment: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This has nothing to do with hunting or target shooting. This is for the people to provide the ultimate defense against a tyrannical government.
But the founders were very clear about it, and the assumption went without saying that everybody can have a gun to go out hunting because everybody was a hunter. But they wanted to be explicit that individuals owned guns because they never wanted to have the populace disarmed. Matter of fact, they encouraged and they believed that each community and each state would have a militia, which was just a group of people who could be called up in an emergency to be deputized for protection. But the gun really was, that Second Amendment was provided, ironically, and a lot of people don't understand this, but it was to protect against abusive government.
If the stamp man tells you to kiss his ass, shall he get away with it and live? Don't let your courage cool, or a few bullies scare you. We've nothing to fear but slavery. Love your liberty, and fight for it like men who know its value. Once lost, it will never, never be regained.
Remember, soldiers, you are free men, fighting for the blessings of liberty. Remember that you and your descendants will become slaves if you do not acquit yourselves like men. Remember Boston and Charlestown. The enemy discovered at great cost what a few brave men, fighting for their own land, for the best of causes, could do against soldiers for hire.
These are the times that try men sold. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country.
But they that stand it now deserve the love and thanks of men and women.
Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. But the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods. It would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated.
I fear none. I see no cause of fear. In the end, we will be the victors. For though the flame of liberty may sometimes cease to shine, the ember will never expire.
What's about to happen is almost too big for my grasp. We don't have men fit for these times. We lack education, experience in the world, money, everything. I feel an unutterable anxiety. God grant us wisdom and strength in the coming months.
The only effective opposition is through the concerted efforts of all the provinces. By uniting, we stand. By dividing, we fall.
General Washington has just given the password for this operation. Victory or death.
We must cut the tall trees. Cut the tall trees now.
This is a SIG 550. It's designed to destroy anything standing within its 400-meter trajectory. and there are over 500,000 of them kept in Swiss homes. Guns and shooting are a strong Swiss tradition. Basic military training is mandatory for young men, and afterwards they're required to keep their weapon at home. Mark Heim is the Ticino representative for the lobby group Protel.
Basically, this was my father's military rifle, and of course he got to keep it when he was finished. I have my grandfather's rifle in the office, hanging on the wall. This was mine when I did service, which is quite an old one. It was introduced in 1957. Was used until 1990. And this is my son's. That's the current model. That's what's being used today. That's what we'll be using to shoot the Feldschießen today.
The Feldschießen, or Tiro Federale in Campagna as it's known in these parts, is an annual Swiss event, and it's also the largest shooting festival in the world. Roughly 200,000 people come out to target practice all across the country. Ammunition is provided by the government. Heim goes regularly to this range, and it's often a family affair.
It was organized by the government to have a very high state of readiness for the Swiss military and population. The target has always been that within 24 to 48 hours, Switzerland could mobilize a pretty large army, I mean, even by European standards.
But it wasn't the militia that sparked Heim's interest in guns as a young man. It was an unassuming trip to a Holocaust museum.
I was going through all the exhibits and the soap and the lampshades made of people's skin. And while I was looking, I heard a funny noise, and there was an old woman maybe 2 meters from me, and she was trying not to cry. She was sort of sobbing very quietly. She was holding it back. If she had been a few meters further away, I wouldn't have heard her. And she obviously had gone through that. That's when the whole impact of it hit me. And I promised myself I would never be in her situation. I would want to be free, never in a situation where somebody could, march us off to ovens or prisons or just take away our freedom. The key to freedom is the ability to be able to defend yourself. And if you don't have the tools to do that, then you are at the mercy of whoever wants to put you away. And the tools for that are...
The Fourth Amendment protects us against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment, you don't have to testify against yourself. If you're ever found confronting police or an investigation or anything, just keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything. Nothing you can say will help you. It will only be used against you. Just ask for your lawyer and remain calm, and go along with it. But just keep your mouth shut. No loss of property without due process. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Just say, I want my lawyer. The Sixth Amendment is the right to a speedy trial. The Eighth Amendment, no excessive fines or cruel and unusual punishments. All of these amendments have been slowly tapped away through by our government. They use the excuse of military combatants and what they do with others, they will eventually do with us as government becomes more rapacious. Article 1, Section 9, the writ of habeas corpus, the right to seek relief from unlawful detention. If all it takes is for the government, not even the government, an attorney general to call you a terrorist, and they can throw you in a hole and never see you again. That's not what this country is designed for, and it's something we definitely need to watch. The 10th Amendment. This is an amendment not a lot of people watch or know about. but the power is not delegated to the United States or denied to the states or reserved to the states, meaning that the states, because we're a confederation of free and independent states, we have the right to nullify anything that the federal government does. This is the key of rolling back our out-of-control federal government. And one of the things that we're going to get into, stuff that we can do, I recommend giving up all hope on any outside, Washington, D.C. Politicians. Don't vote for them. Don't work for their elections. Congressmen, senators, presidents, it's a waste of time. Concentrate all your efforts on your local communities and state governments, and educate people about how we can nullify federal encroachment onto our rights. States' rights need to be brought to the forefront, and nullification is a very powerful weapon that we have not used. It is better to die on your feet. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking may be heard on the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat, sir, let it come. Patrick Henry. If ever time should come when vain and inspiring men shall possess the highest seats of government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. Samuel Adams. It is the duty of the patriot to protect his country from its government. Thomas Paine. Necessity is the plea of every infringement of human freedom. It is the argument of tyrants, and it is the creed of slaves. William Pitt.
And lastly, as promised, a special comment tonight on the signing of the Military Commissions Act and the loss of habeas corpus. We have lived as if in a trance. We have lived as people in fear. And now, our rights and our freedoms in peril, we slowly awaken to learn that we have been afraid of the wrong thing. Therefore, tonight have we truly become the inheritors of our American legacy. For on this first full day that the Military Commissions Act is in force, we now face what our ancestors faced at other times of exaggerated crisis and melodramatic fear-mongering, a government more dangerous to our liberty than is the enemy it claims to protect us from. We have been here before, and we have been here before, led here by men better and wiser and nobler than George W. Bush. We have been here when President John Adams insisted that the Alien and Sedition Acts were necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use those acts to jail newspaper editors, American newspaper editors, in American jails for things they wrote about America. We have been here when President Woodrow Wilson insisted that the Espionage Act was necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use that act to prosecute 2,000 Americans, especially those he disparaged as hyphenated Americans, most of whom were guilty only of advocating peace in a time of war. American public speakers in American jails for things they said about America. And we have been here when President Franklin D. Roosevelt insisted that Executive Order 9066 was necessary to save American lives, only to watch him use that order to imprison and pauperize 110,000 Americans, while his man in charge, General DeWitt, told Congress, it makes no difference whether he is an American citizen, he is still a Japanese. American citizens in American camps were something they neither wrote nor said nor did, but for the choices they or their ancestors had made about coming to America. Each of these actions was undertaken for the most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And each was a betrayal of that for which the president who advocated them claimed to be fighting. Adams and his party were swept from office and the Alien and Sedition Acts erased. Many of the very people Wilson silenced survived him, and one of them even ran to succeed him and got 900,000 votes, though his presidential campaign was conducted entirely from his jail cell. And Roosevelt's internment of the Japanese was not merely the worst blight on his record, but 4 decades later it would necessitate a formal apology from the government of the United States to the citizens of the United States whose lives it ruined. The most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. In times of fright, we have been only human. We have let Roosevelt's fear of fear itself overtake us. We have listened to the little voice inside that has said, the wolf is at the door. This will be temporary. This will be precise. This too shall pass. We have accepted that the only way to stop the terrorists is to let the government become just a little bit like the terrorists. Just the way we once accepted that the only way to stop the Soviets was to let the government become just a little bit like the Soviets, or substitute the Japanese, or the Germans, or the socialists, or the anarchists, or the immigrants, or the British, or the aliens. The most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And always, always wrong. With the distance of history, the questions will be narrowed and few. Did this generation of Americans take the threat seriously, and did we do what it takes to defeat that threat? Wise words, and ironic ones, Mr. Bush. Your own, of course, yesterday in signing the Military Commissions Act. You spoke so much more than you know, sir. Sadly, of course, the distance of history will recognize that the threat this generation of Americans needed to take seriously was you. We have a long and painful history of ignoring the prophecy attributed to Benjamin Franklin that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. But even within this history, we have never before codified the poisoning of habeas corpus, that wellspring of protection from which all essential liberties flow. You, sir, have now befouled that spring. You, sir, have now given us chaos and called it order. You, sir, have now imposed subjugation and called it freedom, for the most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And again, Mr. Bush, all of them wrong. We have handed a blank check drawn against our own freedom to a man who has said it is unacceptable to compare anything this country has ever done to anything the terrorists have ever done. We have handed a blank check drawn against our own freedom to a man who has insisted again that the United States does not torture. It's against our laws and it's against our values. And who has said that with a straight face while the pictures from Abu Ghraib prison and the stories of waterboarding figuratively fade in and out around him. We have handed a blank check drawn against our own freedom to a man who may now, if he so decides, declare not merely any non-American citizens unlawful enemy combatants and ship them somewhere, anywhere, but may now, if he so decides, declare you an unlawful enemy combatant and ship you somewhere, anywhere. And if you think this hyperbole or hysteria, ask the newspaper editors when John Adams was president, or the pacifists when Woodrow Wilson was president, or the Japanese at Manzanar when Franklin Roosevelt was president. And if you somehow think habeas corpus has not been suspended for American citizens, but only for everybody else, ask yourself this. If you are pulled off the street tomorrow and they call you an alien, or an undocumented immigrant, or an unlawful enemy combatant, exactly how are you going to convince them to give you a court hearing to prove you are not? Do you think this Attorney General is going to help you? This president now has his blank check. He lied to get it. He lied as he received it. Is there any reason to even hope that he has not lied about how he intends to use it, nor who he intends to use it against? These military commissions will provide a fair trial, you told us yesterday, Mr. Bush, in which the accused are presumed innocent, have access to an attorney, and can hear all the evidence against them. Presumed innocent, Mr. Bush. The very piece of paper you signed as you said that allows for detainees to be abused up to the point just before they sustain serious mental and physical trauma in the hope of getting them to incriminate themselves. And they may no longer even invoke the Geneva Conventions in their own defense. Access to an attorney, Mr. Bush? Lieutenant Commander Charles Swift said on this program, sir, and to the Supreme Court, that he was only granted access to his detainee defendant on the promise that the detainee would plead guilty. Hearing all the evidence, Mr. Bush, the Military Commissions Act specifically permits the introduction of classified evidence not made available to the defense. Your words are lies, sir. They are lies that imperil us all. One of the terrorists believed to have planned the 9/11 attacks, you told us yesterday, said he hoped the attacks would be the beginning of the end of America. That terrorist, sir, could only hope. Not his actions nor the actions of a ceaseless line of terrorists, real or imagined, could measure up to what you have wrought. Habeas corpus, gone. The Geneva Conventions, optional. The moral force we shined outwards to the world as an eternal beacon and inwards at ourselves as an eternal protection, snuffed out. These things you have done, Mr. Bush, they would constitute the beginning of the end of America. And did it ever occur to you once, sir, somewhere in amidst your 8 separate, gruesome, intentional, terroristic invocations yesterday of the horrors of 9/11, that with only a little further shift in this world we now know, just a touch more repudiation of all of that for which our patriots have died, did it ever occur to you once that in just 27 months and 2 days from now, when you leave office, some irresponsible future president and a competent tribunal of his lackeys would be entitled by the actions of your own hand to declare the status of unlawful enemy combatant 4 and convene a military commission to try not John Walker Lind, but George Walker Bush for the most vital, the most urgent, the most inescapable of reasons. And doubtless, sir, all of them, as always, wrong. Joe Scarborough is next. Good night and good luck.
All right, so that's Keith Olbermann, who is obviously a very vocal critic against the Bushes, and has pretty much since gone quiet since Obama's in. And you know, it's a trick that the elite use to have you know, the left attack the right and the right attack the left. Meanwhile, we never get anywhere because both sides don't offer any real change. The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and the chairs out of the way, and you will see a brick wall at the back of the theater. Frank Zappa. Still not convinced you're a slave? Well, look what our loving government is gearing up for. This is an actual employment ad that went around the internet, and it's National Guard. We have 2 bright young citizens who are smiling, and then they put on the government garb, and all of a sudden they have that sense of superiority and you know, whatever they want to do. But look at what it is: corrections officer and internment and resettlement specialist. What possibly could our government be doing, recruiting and training people to do internment and resettlement specialists? If that doesn't reek of prison camps or you know, moving people around through you know, government domination, I don't know what else is. And look at the experience and the levels. You know, all you need is a high school level diploma, and you know, you can do it part time. Like, this is like lowest of the common denominator. You get 100% scholarship, paid training, monthly paycheck, all that great stuff, to become an internment and resettlement specialist. Amazing. I found this picture on the internet. This is a German soldier shooting a mother and child in the back of the head. This can, will, and does happen in society. Humans are capable of this. Governments are capable of this. It's a sick sight to think that a man could pull a trigger on a defenseless woman while she's clutching her baby in the field. Those now possessing weapons and ammunition are ordered at once to turn them over to the local police authority. Firearms and ammunition found in a Jew's possession will be forfeited to the government without compensation. Whoever willingly or negligently violates the provisions will be punished with imprisonment and a fine. This is a German Minister of the Interior, November 11th, 1938. Governments know that disarmament is a precursor to genocide. Anytime the government starts coming after the citizens' rights to defend themselves against a repressive government, bad things happen. And that, for me, is the line in the sand. They can tax me, they can spy on me, they can take away every right, but the line in the sand where I will not be pushed any further is if they ever come after my guns. And the reason for that is most of the deaths in the 20th century were not due to war. They were due to governments slaughtering their own defenseless people. Experts agree gun control works. Wherever the citizens are unable to stop these gangs of government armies and police, governments will and can just wipe out citizens. Disarmament is a precursor to genocide. And there's two lines there. You need troops to obey the orders. And I hope that every military man, and I certainly knew this in my Marine unit, every Marine has a duty to disobey unlawful orders. I was fortunate to be in a Marine Reserve unit, infantry. Most of the men that I served with were police officers. The officers were stockbrokers and businessmen. I served with a really great group of guys, and I loved working with them for the 7 years that I was there. But I've met other military units who I don't think understand that principle. I've worked with other units overseas, and I guarantee they would be the ones to do whatever order is told to them, simply because of the chain of command. My unit and the Marines I served with, I know damn well one, the officers would never push an order like that onto us, and I know the sergeants and the corporals were smart enough to know that they do not have to follow those orders. And then the other part of it is citizens obeying the gun laws. It's our Second Amendment right. And the government can try many different ways of taking away our rights, but at the end of the day, if it only takes a citizen to willingly give it up, there's ways of getting around these laws, hiding your possessions, but it takes troops obeying orders, and it takes citizens to obeying gun laws for this genocide to happen. This is a quote I found on the internet from a guy I really respect. Unfortunately, he uses this an avatar name, Twisted Avatar. Never turn in your guns, ever. The day you do that, you acknowledge a higher power than your God that gave you your freedoms. And that is what you will get. You will get lined up and shot. This is another amazing photo of, I'm sure these people had to dig their own graves, kneel down, and feel the bullet in the back of their head as they're tied and bound as people watch on. Utter crimes of humanity. And while I don't think our United States government is ever going to get to this point, we do need to be vigilant against this and be aware of it and the historical consequences of these actions. A people armed and free forms a barrier against the enterprises of ambition and is a bulwark for the nation against foreign invasion and domestic oppression. I remember running across an article about a Japanese general who, when the Japanese actually thought of invading us, they knew it was a short debate because they knew behind every blade of grass would be a citizen with a gun. Free men own guns, slaves don't. If there's any reason that you don't own a gun, that you don't think that you'll be able to do it, have something. Don't wait for that day to come where you are ready and you don't have the chance. Before all else, be armed. Niccolo Machiavelli.
Look, the people you are after are the people you depend on. We cook your meals. We haul your trash. We connect your calls. We drive your ambulances. We guard you while you sleep. Do not fuck with us.
Every normal man must be tempted at times to spit on his hands, hoist the black flag, and begin slitting throats. I'm a huge proponent of the Second Amendment, but I am not a proponent of violent revolution. And while the last couple slides have shown what governments can do and what citizens ought to do, I believe that there's a far better way of dealing with the troubles of our times, and I'm going to spend a great deal on alternatives towards violent revolution. I think that's the final line in the sand, and one that we need to be aware of, but by no means is the action that I'm planning on taking, and not one that I propose.